Shadrach Roundy Trail Journal. This is based on the Shadrach Roundy Trail Journal. This version expands, without adding any new information. For example, whereas the original journal might have said, "passed 7 graves," this says, "the company passed 7 graves," making it more readable in narrative form. David Burlock Lamoreaux was a pioneer with this company. Narrative version June 27 to September 10, 1850. June 27, 1850. The company passed 7 graves. The roads were good, and there was plenty of feed, but there was no wood and no water fit to drink. There was, however, plenty of slough water for the cattle. June 28, 1850. Heavy rain fell, and the roads were bad. The company met 2 teams coming from the valley and passed 1 grave. There was no wood or water. Another death occurred, a daughter from Williams's camp. June 29, 1850. The roads remained bad, and more rain fell. The company met the Kearney mail. 6 horses belonging to Mott's group were lost. The company camped at a slough, where the water was bad and there was no wood. June 30, 1850. The company drove to Fairview, within sight of the Platte River, and laid up. The Valley Mail came into camp at noon and stayed until the following day. Here the company found good water, plenty of wood, and fine feed for the cattle. From the time they left Weeping Water until they reached this creek, they had found no water fit to drink. There had been abundant slough water in almost every ravine and plenty of good feed, but no wood. July 1, 1850. The roads were bad, and the company had several wet swamps to cross. They passed 1 grave. The water was bad, and there was no wood. 2 corrals were formed that night, with Mott's group camping by themselves. July 2, 1850. The company passed a number of bad sloughs. The axletree of David Henry Beck's wagon broke. They passed 6 graves, then drove on to Cottonwood Point on the Platte River and camped. There they found plenty of fuel, water, and feed, and they saw 3 more graves. July 3, 1850. The roads were good. The company passed 5 graves and camped at the river, where there was no wood. July 4, 1850. The company crossed the bluffs. A fight occurred between an unidentified person and his driver. They drove about 23 miles. The weather was very warm, and some of the ox teams failed to reach camp. Those teams stopped about 5 miles behind. The company passed 4 graves that day and camped near the river, where there was no wood. July 5, 1850. The company laid up until the rest of the train arrived. They then drove about 15 miles to a place with a number of bad sloughs. July 15, 1850. The company met a government train of 4 wagons. They passed 13 graves and saw fields of buffalo. They camped on a bluff near the lower crossing of the South Fork. Mott's group lost a fine horse while running buffalo. The company also found a man 3 miles off the road who was in a starving condition. July 16, 1850. The company was detained because cattle had strayed. They saw thousands of buffalo and passed 10 graves. They camped at the river, where there was no wood. A good spring was noted at a distance of 100 to the left of the road. July 17, 1850. The company passed 17 graves. The mail from Council Bluffs stopped with them at noon. The roads were first-rate. They camped 1 mile from the road near the river. July 18, 1850. The company drove to the upper crossing of the South Fork. Quicksand made the crossing difficult. They passed 14 graves, and the feed was good. July 19, 1850. The company crossed the river and camped on the opposite side. Walls 50 was also there. July 20, 1850. The company drove to Ash Hollow. The roads were hilly, with one very steep descent near the hollow. There were plenty of good springs and wood, but no feed. They passed 11 graves. July 21, 1850. The company drove 2 miles to find feed and then laid up. They passed 5 graves. July 22, 1850. The company passed 12 graves. The roads were sandy and very heavy. They camped at the river, where there was no wood, but the feed was good. July 23, 1850. The company traveled through heavy sand all day. They passed 19 graves and camped on the river, where there was no wood. July 24, 1850. The company camped 3/4 of a mile from the road near the river. They were within sight of Chimney Rock and opposite the ancient ruined bluffs. There was a good spring at the campsite and a number of other springs along the road. They passed 14 graves. July 25, 1850. The company passed 14 graves and camped at the river near Chimney Rock. July 26, 1850. The company stopped at Chimney Rock at noon, then drove to the foot of Scott's Bluff. They passed 12 graves and camped near Bennett's 50. July 27, 1850. Rain fell, and the company laid over. July 28, 1850. The company drove to the trading point and passed 6 graves. Feed was scarce. Bennett's 50, Wall's 50, Oregon packers, and horse teams bound for the mines were all camped there. There was no feed or water for the livestock. July 29, 1850. The company drove 2 miles around the bluff to a good campground. They passed 6 graves. July 30, 1850. The company drove 20 miles and camped near the river, where the feed was good. They passed 6 graves. Only 8 teams remained, the balance of the train withdrew and went ahead. July 31, 1850. The company passed 17 graves and camped within 10 miles of Fort Laramie. They met a returning government train. The feed was good, and there was plenty of wood. August 1, 1850. The company crossed Laramie Fork at noon and passed 15 graves. They also passed Bennett's 50 and the balance of their own train. They camped 3 miles ahead of them, beyond the steep descent of a hill. One more team left that day. The surviving entry then breaks off after the words, "The Widow." August 2, 1850. The company crossed some steep hills and passed 3 graves. They camped at Dead Timber Creek in company with Sessions 50. August 3, 1850, entry marked error. The writer marked this entry error in the margin. The company laid up for 3/4 of the day because David Henry Beck's cow had strayed. They then drove 5 miles, but the surviving sentence ends at that point. August 3, 1850, second entry. The company drove to Horse Creek. The road was heavy. There was a good spring, and the feed was tolerable. August 4, 1850. The company laid up for 3/4 of the day. A cow was lost after running back. They drove 5 miles over Big Hill and camped at the first creek. The feed was good, and there was some water. They passed 5 graves. August 5, 1850. The company drove to La Bonte, passed 3 graves, and camped 2½ miles up the creek. They camped in company with Stewart's team of 5 wagons and Colonel Reese. August 6, 1850. The company drove to La Prele and passed Little's train. Griffith's wagon broke on the red sand. There was plenty of wood and water, but feed was scarce. August 7, 1850. The company drove 8 miles to Fourche Boise and passed 4 graves. Wood, water, and grass were plentiful. August 8, 1850. The company drove 3 miles beyond Deer Creek and passed 3 graves. There was plenty of feed. David Burlock Lamoreaux left an ox that day. August 9, 1850. The company drove 12 miles. Near the deep gulf, there was good feed and plenty of wood and water. August 10, 1850. The company laid up. An ox belonging to Lamoreaux died. August 11, 1850. The company came to the Upper Platte Ferry, crossed the river, and camped on the opposite side. They passed 3 graves, and feed was scarce. The destruction of property there by gold diggers was tremendous. August 12, 1850. The company drove 12 miles on a new road and camped on the Platte River for the last time. The roads were hilly and very sandy, but the feed was fine. August 13, 1850. The company camped at Willow Springs. There was 1 grave there and no feed. They met government men from Fort Hull. August 14, 1850. The company drove to Greasewood. They met an express from the valley and passed 2 graves. The food was good, and there was plenty of sage. August 15, 1850. The company camped at Independence Rock. The roads were sandy and very heavy. The feed was tolerable, and there was no wood. A considerable number of dead cattle lay along the road. August 16, 1850. The company drove 3 miles beyond Devil's Gate and passed 6 graves. The feed was excellent. August 17, 1850. The company drove 1¾ miles beyond Sage Creek and passed 4 graves. The boys left David Henry Beck. There was wood and water, but almost no grass. The road was heavy and very sandy. The company crossed the Sweetwater twice that day. August 18, 1850. The company laid up during a cold rainstorm. August 19, 1850. The storm continued. August 20, 1850. The company drove to the rocky ridges and passed 2 graves. The roads were very bad, but the feed was tolerably good. August 21, 1850. The company killed 2 buffalo. They laid up and dried the meat. August 22, 1850. The company continued as on the previous day, laying up and drying the buffalo meat. August 23, 1850. The company drove to Ford No. 4. Lamb's part of Johnson's company joined them. The feed was good. They met cattle from the valley that were intended for Little's train. August 24, 1850. The company camped at Ford No. 5. They passed a number of dead cattle, Ice Spring, and 1 grave. The feed was poor. August 25, 1850. The company drove 10 miles to the place where the road left the river. They passed 1 grave, and feed was scarce. August 26, 1850. The company crossed the Rocky Ridges Road. After that, the road was good. They camped on Willow Creek, passed 2 graves, and found good feed. August 27, 1850. The company drove to Pacific Springs and passed 7 graves. The feed was good. August 28, 1850. The company drove 10 miles on a new road to avoid the sandy route. They found good feed and plenty of water. August 29, 1850. By noon, the company had driven 8 miles to Third Creek. From that point, there would be no more water for 24 miles, until they reached Big Sandy. The road was good. They drove 6 miles farther and camped. August 30, 1850. The company started at 1 o'clock and reached Big Sandy by 9. They laid by until 3, then continued to a point 1 mile beyond the bend. August 31, 1850. The company reached Green River by noon. The feed was excellent, but the crossing was difficult and the water was very high. They continued to the place where the road left the river and camped in company with Thomas Johnson's 50. There was plenty of timber and water, but feed was scarce. They passed 3 graves. September 1, 1850. The company drove on to Ham's Fork, where they found excellent feed. They passed 1 grave. September 2, 1850. The company camped 1 mile beyond the 4th crossing of Black's Fork. The feed was fine. September 3, 1850. The company drove to Fort Bridger. Stewart's train was there. The feed was good, and the company passed 2 graves. September 4, 1850. The company drove to Soda Springs. They met help intended for Lamoreaux, and the feed was good. They also met Captain Stansbury that day and passed 4 graves. September 5, 1850. Near the summit of High Ridge, the company met Shadrach Roundy. They drove to Bear River and found good feed. September 6, 1850. The company drove to Deep Ravine, where the feed was good. September 7, 1850. The company camped near the Red Fork of the Weber. They passed 4 graves, and the feed was fairly good. September 8, 1850. At Canyon Creek, the roads were bad, but there was plenty of feed. September 9, 1850. The company reached the summit of the second mountain. There was no feed. September 10, 1850. The company stopped at noon between the 2 mountains. They then camped in the city of the Great Salt Lake.